Grief is not a destination.
I actually expected very not so good reactions. I felt a lot of love and I felt a lot of support, but at the same time, the people that I thought would be there were kind of taking a step back and getting awkward.
That was probably the reason why I don't remember crying.
I don't think everyone understands that when you're early in grief, there is no fixing this.
We need to get better at giving people the space to grieve the way that they need to grieve.
Grief stays with you forever.
Grief also looks different for different people. Those simple words and that simple act of love,
yeah,
I think that's so transformative.
I think men get it a lot more, so they definitely can't cry.
When something traumatic, like losing a really close loved one, happens in your life, you physically change, you mentally change, you emotionally change.
You have to accept that grief really is forever. You don't get the losses. You don't. You just learn how to deal with it.
Grief isn't a one-time thing.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Fearless Fireside Chats. Today's episode comes with a trigger warning, as we will be exploring the layers and depths of grief and loss. This topic resonates with me quite deeply, as I lost my dad when I was a teenager, and navigating that loss at that young age was nothing short of overwhelming and isolating. I totally understand the notions of move on, be strong, and the impact that that can have on someone's grief journey. I'm joined today by my wonderful guest, Sita, South Asian baby loss advocate and co-host of the Grieving Hearts podcast. We are on a mission to break the cultural silences associated to grief and normalizing everything that comes with it, sharing our own personal journeys and the impacts that that's had on us, exploring how we can all show up more confidently for our nearest and dearest experiencing grief. It's about time we stop shying away from these hard conversations and just start it. I really hope you enjoy this episode. Sita, welcome to Fearless Fireside Chats.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we are so honoured to have you here on our sofa. Before we kind of get stuck into everything, would you please give us kind of a brief overview of your story and the background of everything, just for anyone that may not be familiar with it?
Absolutely. So I lost my son Arjun 5 years ago in 2019. He was, I'd reached 38 weeks and 6 days of pregnancy, and sadly I lost him during labour due to hospital negligence. So several red flags, just bad timing, and just have been on my grief journey ever since.
Obviously, that's so devastating on so many different levels.
Absolutely.
How did you, just talk to me about how that, those initial phases of grief, how did that feel? Do you remember it? Is it a suppressed memory?
Yeah. I mean, it's so weird because I didn't know what caused his death for such a long time. So I was grieving that he's not here, but also there was this confusion sitting in that what has happened. I had no idea what had happened. And, I was in a place of safety. So I never thought it was the hospital's fault at any point, because it's a hospital.
Why would you?
Yeah, you absolutely wouldn't. So it was a really confusing time for me. What did I do wrong? There's a lot of self-blame. There's a lot of people kind of trying to add their fixes into it, that this is why it happened, or maybe it was this. So it was a really, really conflicting time. And honestly, it's a strange one, because I feel like it was a blur and a lot of it is a muffled memory, but at the same time, it feels so fresh and so much like yesterday. So, yeah.
It's like a blend between a vivid memory.
Yeah.
To am I making this up?
Definitely.
Did this really happen? Or is this my imagination thinking that this is what happened?
Exactly. Because from hearing the news, because I thought he was fine, because I'd birthed him and they took me into theatre, and I was in this room now and I thought he was perfectly fine. So when they came and told me the news, between then and when they brought him into me, I have no memory. And then I have no memory of the time after family started coming in. And it's very, very strange.
And also you were medicated.
Yeah.
The trauma of birth as well alone, let alone
absolutely,
this news as well. That's going to play its part. What were some of the reactions that you kind of first encountered when you first started talking about kind of the grief that you were experiencing, or even the loss?
Do you know what? It's a funny one, because I had such a big mixture
Okay.
Like it was huge. It was one spectrum to the other, and I actually expected very not so good reactions because I've seen grief from a young age. My parents lost their child, and reactions weren't great, and I was really surprised at how supportive everyone was and how understanding everyone was as well. But also, I think it's natural for a lot of people to draw back. So we had all of it in one go. So I felt a lot of love and I felt a lot of support. But at the same time, the people that I thought would be there were kind of taking a step back and getting awkward. So it was, it was a big mix.
And a surprise as well, right? Because you're still, I guess, trying to navigate the news, process your own emotions, and sometimes without knowing, unsolicited advice, unsolicited kind of opinions and thoughts, and you're in a bit of a head funk, you would say, right? About
Definitely.
how to even deal with or comprehend.
Yeah,
even,
you don't know what's going on. And then and I think, people are very, they really want to fix your grief, don't they? They're really desperate to try and fix what's broken in that time. And I don't think everyone understands that when you're early in grief, you all you can do is support, and all you can do is be there and be a shoulder and just listen. There is no fixing this.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not in anyone else's hand to fix grief. But people just feel like it's almost like a responsibility that I must come in and just help you through this. But most people did just come and listen. And I really, really appreciated that so much. But a lot of first few days we were at the hospital, of course. So I was spending a lot of time with Arjun, who, we were taking pictures. It was just our immediate family that was in there. So it was precious moments together. And I think everyone was really honouring that and giving us time. My sister-in-law would literally stand outside to make sure that I had a lot of my alone moments with Arjun as much as possible, making those memories. And it was really nice that these people knew how to help at that time.
And protect that space for you.
Yeah.
And you couldn't. Yeah.
Definitely. And they were almost like being our brain almost in that moment, because me and Rick were both just in this funk and we didn't know what to do. We weren't sure how to, do we take pictures? It felt awkward taking pictures. A lot of lost parents say this. They're just like, oh, it felt really weird to take pictures. But, they were encouraging us, like, do what you need to do. Do you want to change his clothes? Do you want to take any pictures? Do you want to do anything else? Hospitals also allow you to take your baby home if you want to. So they were like, do you want to do that? And it's nice to have those people to think on your behalf almost. Yeah, really important.
And I think it's like you said, like sometimes people are so fixated on fixing
the
problem. But actually the problem is not something that you can fix, because grief is not a destination.
Oh, no.
Definitely a journey, and a journey that doesn't have an end destination. And I think it's very, unless, I think it's one of those unique things, because unless you've gone through grief yourself, you cannot even comprehend, understand how devastating, heartbreaking, traumatic.
Yeah, it's just awful. And I don't think people understand how bad it really, really is. And I don't think I understood to this level either. I mean, I've lost people in my life, but this was just, it was surreal. I mean, I always talk about the natural order quite a bit, because I think, we're wired to think, oh, we'll lose grandparents and eventually we'll lose, people who are older.
Age order.
It will be age order, but you never think that your child will go before you. So it's like, it leaves you in a really weird space, because you're just like, it's hard to accept that your child has gone. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And with grief, I think everyone puts that year mark, don't they?
Yeah.
They give you a year. That's it. That's all you're entitled to. You must move on after a year.
Yeah.
Life goes on. And it's like, it's not as simple as that. It doesn't go on. Grief stays with you forever.
And I think I have such a big issue, and let's actually talk and dive deeper into that, around that whole like connotation of, or the misconception of like, move on, be strong. It's, they would want you to do X, Y, and Z. Like, I think
don't get me wrong. I think it comes from a good place. It's
It
not a
does.
place of malice. And I totally understand that. But the harm that
Yeah.
could have and the impact that those words can have, I don't think we talk enough about what that actually
Yeah.
feels like to receive something like that.
A lot of those comments are for that person's comfort. You're comforting yourself. That's not really doing anything for us. And then the responsibility to grit our teeth and be like, okay, yeah, they wouldn't want me to be sad. They wouldn't want me to cry. So, okay. And then all that happens is we don't cry in front of you. We don't talk to you about
Or you
it.
bottle it up and you actually
Yeah.
suppress that emotion. Like,
Yes.
I remember really vividly, I lost my dad when I was 15. And I just remember, people saying, you've got to be strong. You're the eldest now. You've got to be strong. And I remember thinking, God, yeah, shit. Like, I need to be strong. I can't cry. I
And that's
can't.
a lot of pressure for you, the age you were as well. What were you, 14, 15?
15,
like
yeah.
that's too young for that kind of responsibility.
And I just remember, obviously I didn't understand it then. But now when I look back at it, I'm like, that was probably the reason why I don't remember crying. I actually don't remember crying. And I feel like
You weren't allowed to grieve.
Exactly. I feel like, especially when someone's telling you be strong,
Yeah.
the last thing you're going to do is break down and cry, right?
Absolutely.
But actually, we need to get better at giving people the space to grieve the way that they need to grieve. Because obviously,
Yeah.
grief also looks different for different people.
Yes.
And I think it's really important to recognize and actually ask, like, what do you need? What was going to make you feel better right now in this moment? And if it's that screaming, scream.
Yeah.
If it's silence, let's just be silent.
Yeah.
I'm here for you. And I think it's just that acknowledgement of what do you need right now?
Yep.
And how can I help you do that? I think those simple words and that simple act of love,
Yeah.
I think that's so transformative. And actually it's quite sad that not a lot of us approach
No.
grievers in that way.
Everyone has their own set of instructions and they're just like, you need to do it like this because I did it like this, or so-and-so I know did it like this. And it's almost what suits them or what they've seen. A lot of people are telling me to go back to work. And I was just like, I've just gone through something super traumatic and I've given birth as well. My body needs rest and I need to actually sit and process all of this. But people thought me throwing myself back into life would fix it. And I actually think it probably would have done more damage. And I think I knew that. So I didn't take that advice. But I was getting all sorts from all directions on what I should and shouldn't do. You need to be strong. Rick was I think men get it a lot more so. They definitely can't cry. So he was getting it a lot, that you need to be supportive. And it's like he's lost a child too.
Yeah.
You have to give him space and time. And out of pressure, he went back to work because I think that, I don't think he thought like I'm entitled to time off as well. And I should take some time off. He went back to work and I remember he used to come home and just really defeated. And I was like, just take a break, stop working for a little bit. You need that time. It's so important to let yourself process that grief, or it bottles up and you project it later on in other ways, in other areas of your life.
And I think, I don't know, that whole, when you were saying like, go back to work and people were kind of pushing you to just get on with life almost.
Yeah.
It feels like, and I don't know, maybe this is like a cultural thing, but specifically within South Asian cultures, it's like a distraction technique.
Yes.
I feel like it's like, oh, just, go back to your daily routine and everything will fall into place and you'll figure it out as you go along. And it can work, but it's also you're not doing the work to process, to feel, to understand yourself. Because I've said this before, but I feel like when something traumatic, like losing a really close loved one, happens in your life, you physically change, you mentally change, you emotionally change. And I think there's an element where you need to get to know this new person that you are after this traumatic event, because you're never the same person. And I think rushing off and, using like work as a distraction or daily life as a distraction, it could probably help. It's like a short-term fix, right? Because it will help you then and there. But actually you're not allowing yourself to feel the things that you need to feel in order to understand. And
it does catch up eventually.
Yeah,
you
'cause
can try and avoid it as much as you want.
Yeah.
It will come back. You will have to address it. I mean, I got pregnant again pretty quickly after Arjun, and my daughter acted like a bit of a distraction for a little bit. Not really, I was still grieving quite heavily, but it was taking my focus. It was splitting my focus now, basically. And even 5 years on, this wave of grief hits me so hard because I haven't had the full time to process everything yet. But I think I've just come to terms with this is a forever thing. That's what makes it really difficult. But also you have to accept that grief really is forever. You don't get over losses. You don't.
Yeah.
You just learn how to deal with it. You learn about the new you. You learn how to fit yourself back into the world again. That's it. And that's all you can do. So, yeah.
It's really interesting because I saw this reel, and I'm not going to say it word for word because I can't remember it, but the essence of it was so beautiful. He was saying how grief isn't a one-time thing, and actually it comes and goes, but actually it's the fact that grief is the beauty of having loved something in someone, and it's that memory and that recalling of that memory. Yes, it's grief because you're bringing back those bad memories of like losing them, but actually it's the privilege that you got to love that thing or that person or that being, and the memories that you had with that person and that being. And I think that whole notion of that, okay, it's been a year or it's been 2 years. Like my dad passed away 20 years ago, and I always say like grief comes and goes. And there's this quote by Vicky Harrison, and she says grief is like an ocean, and it comes in waves and it ebbs and flows. And sometimes it's really overwhelming and sometimes it's calm.
Yeah.
But all we can do is learn to swim.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Because we always think that grief is like in that moment, in that instant, or in that month, or within that first year.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, it's been a year.
That's it. Get over it. Why haven't you moved on yet?
Why are you dwelling on it? Or it's been 10 years. Like, oh, it's been 10 years. It's fine. Or, oh, it's been 20 years. Oh, it's been 50 years. Like, oh, you should be used to it by now.
Yeah.
But actually, for me, it's that no one talks about grief in the way that you're going to be forever grieving.
Of course.
You're going to be forever burying this person in your mind because you're reliving the emotions that went through either on that day or when you were with them or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It does come in different weights and different forms and different milestones. And I'm sure like I feel it more in like big milestones, like birthdays, weddings, celebrations.
They're missing from the future as well. They're missing today. They're going to be missing in the future. And it's difficult. It's not something you can just click your fingers and get over. No, we love them. So the grief is going to remain. It's as easy as that.
And I think it's one of the things that I would love this episode to serve as is not only just a reminder of what grief looks like for other people, but also just a reminder for us to be just that little bit more compassionate
100%.
and that little bit more understanding and help remove. I know it's not one person can't remove the societal expectations and pressures. Like we're not unrealistic here, but it's helping. Like it goes a long way when one person says, it's okay to feel like this.
Yeah. Because it is a huge South Asian problem, isn't it? Because grief it's got such a bad name. It's all negative.
It's negative,
like,
but bad energy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not. Grief is love. It is love. And, I feel like I should be able to speak about Arjun as much as I speak about my girls.
Yeah.
Because when I have spoken about him, sometimes people would say, we hear a lot about Arjun. It would be really nice to hear about your girls more so. Or if I post on Instagram, for example, like you post a lot of Arjun, what about the girls? And it's like, but I post all of them. And, I get to say the girls' names every day. I get to see them every day. I don't get that opportunity with him. So I'd like to use the space to, say his name a little bit more or share him with the few pictures I have of him. And it's important that I love all my children exactly the same for
100%. I think that's so key because it's not that you don't love the others just as much.
Yeah.
Actually, it's the fact that you don't get to experience him in the day to day. And this is actually your way of keeping him alive.
Exactly.
I'm keeping him present.
I'm kind of parenting him in my own way, because I've lost that opportunity now to do parenting the most obvious way. So this is how I parent him. And it's really hard because I find it really healing to do the things I do. And everybody's kind of like, oh, it's really bad for you. Don't do it like that. Just, move on. You've got your girls now. Life has to go on. And it's like, it is going on. I'm just taking him with me. And I'm allowed to do that because it's not harming me. It's troubling you, not me.
Let's talk about that, because a lot of this is like, they're almost like, the ones that we've lost are almost made to feel like elephants in the room.
Yeah.
Because it makes other people uncomfortable.
So uncomfortable.
And I find that really selfish. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
That is really selfish, because you are looking after your needs and what you want, as opposed to, this might be what Sita needs right now.
Yeah.
So let me ask questions. Let me be inquisitive. Let me support her on this. Like, I know when my dad passed, we had loads of people, like, South Asian culture, you mourn for the first kind of month.
Yeah.
Everyone comes to the house, literally. Yeah. I don't even think we were back from the hospital and people were already at the house, like, it's that invasive. And then we go from one extreme to, like, the 31st ceremony's over and everyone's
gone.
And you're just like,
you don't see half of them again.
Dropped like a hat.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't understand how a culture that is so rich in its cultures and traditions and ways of living and community and all its greatness, also the way that everyone just goes back to normal, and then you are also expected to go back to normal, but actually your normal is no longer
you have to find that normal, but you need the support to find that normal as well. But it's funny, isn't it, because this tradition of having everybody around, it's so lovely because it's that support, it's that togetherness, but I feel like it's become more of a checkbox situation. People come, sit silently, don't actually support you. You have nothing helpful to say. If anything, probably make it worse, and then leave and then disappear for good. And it's like, come and listen, come and actually, be supportive and allow us to cry, because now we're not allowed to cry because it will hurt their soul, and they're just very they're very quick to try and wipe your tears. And it's like, but this is what we need. This is part of the process. When I wanted to cry, people would try and stop me, and it would make the pain sit in a really weird way in my body, actually. Yeah. And I remember I had a friend who would call me every few days, and I started ignoring calls at one point, but hers I'd pick up because she would just let me cry. That's all I needed. I just needed someone to be there while I cried and just vented and just spoke about him and how unfair life felt at the time. And that's where my healing came from. Not the people who were like, don't hurt him by crying and, you need to just move on, have another baby. And, because that's a classic line that people who lose children get, because that's going to, another baby will fix this one that's passed away, apparently. So
I think there's so much in that. But first, when you said that, your friend used to call you and that was the only call that you used to pick up, for me, that's like telling me that you used to want to speak to her because she gave you a safe space.
Yeah.
She gave you that comfort that you needed, that you weren't able to get. And I think that in itself goes miles beyond showing up hours after hearing the event of someone passing, because you can show up, but you are not adding any value or doing any good. Yeah. And if you really care for whoever you're showing up for, wouldn't you really just want them to be okay?
Exactly.
Or give them some sort of comfort in knowing it's okay to feel like this.
Yeah.
Or like, I'm here, whatever you need. Like small, like that small little sentence.
Yeah.
I can't tell you.
So much.
Isn't it? Like, it genuinely makes it feel like a sentence is like a hug.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like for
Honestly,
me.
It was a lot of silent sitting sometimes with a few of my close people. And that was healing for me, because you were sitting in the mud with me. You were just allowing me to feel and just for me to be. You weren't coming in with, let me fix you, let me do this for you. This is, they'd follow those like a almost like a book, like a checklist, like this is like the 7 stages of grief.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always work.
Yeah.
I know people want it to work, but it's not. It's up and down. It changes too much.
And grief is not linear.
No.
It's really not. Like some days you feel absolutely fantastic, take on the world.
Yeah.
And then the next day you've taken 10 steps backwards and you just feel like you're reliving every single moment of that day again.
Absolutely.
And I also think it's really important to note that for some people, those 7 stages of grief might work perfectly.
Exactly.
But for some people, it's like, what the hell is this? Like, I'm just trying to be. And I think it's also coming from a place of understanding that everyone is individual.
Yeah.
And everyone is unique. So how the hell can we all grieve in the same way?
Exactly. We all come from different experiences as well. And how I see one thing might not be the same for somebody else. I mean, I know people who've been able to move on from their losses quite graciously, and they've been a lot quicker to accept and just move on from it. I know people who haven't actually even seen their babies after losing them because they don't believe that, you know, they believe the soul's moved on, so that's not their baby anymore. And, you know, I grieved the way I did, and it was hard for a lot of people to accept that, or the fact I spoke about it a lot, because I think it's when people were having miscarriages back in the days, or even up until recently, you know, people almost treat it like a dirty secret, and then some people are forced to then keep it within themselves because grief should be a dirty secret as well. You know, it's meant to be behind closed doors, but actually I think people found it really difficult when I was speaking up and talking about my grief so openly, that people would actually say, what you're doing is really unhealthy, like grieving is unhealthy. I was like, not really, because I'm processing actually, and I'm trying to live my life quite, you know, as well as I can and not project it onto those around me. But
If anything, that's actually bloody healthy.
Yeah, but they don't see it that way because of their own experiences.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a funny one.
I think it's so... I don't know, I have a mix of emotions because I feel angry and sympathetic at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm angry because it's like, how dare you?
Towards those emotions quite a lot myself, I think.
I just find it really fascinating, really, because I think unless you've gone through a loss, and again, I lost my dad when I was 15. My brother was so much younger than me. And you could arguably say we both lost our dad. But how my relationship with my dad was so different to my brother's relationship with my dad. And I feel like we're almost bucketed to be like, well, you're his children and your children should grieve in this way.
Yes.
But there's actually so many different facets and nuances to the grief that you were experiencing, because you're not only just grieving that person, you're grieving a relationship that was and that you've lost as well in the future, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's so important to understand and recognize when someone is going through grief, because that, to me, and I don't know if this is the same applies, but to me, I was also mourning the life that we've now lost.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to get that time back. Or we're not, and the time's not going to happen. You know, my dad's not going to be there when I get married. My dad's not going to see my children. And I think I didn't realize it then, but I now, that's when I see grief kind of come up again for me.
Yeah.
Is
Because
in those moments.
you lose him every single day, especially during those milestones.
Yeah.
But you've lost him every day. You think about him when you see other fathers dropping their kids off to school and you're not being dropped off by your dad. When you went to, you know, if you go to uni, and there's other parents doing drop-offs and whatnot, and especially with marriage and, you know, fathers giving their daughters away, it all comes back. It does. You lose them every single time.
I remember I had my dad's photo, so at our Hindu wedding, and I wanted to have it on the stage, on the mandap, on the Manavara with us. And the priest said, no, you're not allowed to have like people that have passed away.
Oh, gosh.
Because it's like a holy place. So I was like, okay. And then I basically had it was like on a screen, and it was like my dad's photo, and it said like, welcome to my daughter's wedding, because normally the parents welcome people to the thing.
That's so lovely.
So then I remember, I didn't tell my husband about this, and when he walked in first, and he walked in and he saw it and he took a photo and he sent it to me, and he was like, this is this is the most beautiful thing that you could have done for your dad. And that set me going, because I was like, oh, like I appreciate that other people appreciate that sentiment. And I think small tokens like that really go a long, long way. And I'd love to hear kind of more around like what helped you cope in those moments. Obviously, we've spoken about like people just being there for you in the silence. Yeah. But what about like kind of beyond the initial stages of grief? Like what did you do? Like what tools and resources did you find the most helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're feeling that way, you want to go through everything that's on offer. So I tried a lot of different types of therapy, and some worked, some didn't. But I think, so I saw a psychologist a couple of months after the loss, and I think it was too soon for me.
Okay.
But really and truly, journaling, writing, being allowed to speak about my grief, and also go into those little silent moments where I withdraw a little bit. It's all very helpful, but I'll pick and choose when I want to do all this. And I have to say I was quite lucky because, lockdown came very quickly after Arjun passed away. And I know it was a really sad time for a lot of people, but it is exactly what I needed, because it shut out the outside noise, which is what was stopping me from healing in the first place. So I got to shut that away and just grieve and just be and just process and understand what has happened. And then by the time we were kind of up and about again and I could go back to work and whatnot, I just started writing. And my husband did the same. He was writing poetry. Oh, wow. And that really helped him. He was going for walks. He was, there was a lot of things he did in his writing. And I started sharing and talking to other lost parents and, writing stuff that resonated with everybody, and also reading what they had to say about their loss. It was all so, so helpful for me, and still is. Like, I still write. Every week I'll sit down and just write my feelings and my thoughts. I might not share it, but it's there for me.
For you, yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes I read back on it and I'm like, wow, like, yes, this is... it puts me back in that space and I can reprocess, because you have to, right? Sometimes you have to start again almost.
Yeah.
It's grief is very, very complex.
Very complex. I remember this is way back before journaling was like a trend or a thing even. But I used to write letters to my dad.
I love that.
And I used to just, because I found it really awkward. I found that initially I was like, God, this is so awkward.
It does feel weird doing
Why
that.
am I doing this? Like, but then I just write, and I just remember it just gave me a sense of peace that I can't even explain. Like, it's just almost like a weight lifted off your shoulders almost. And then after a while I kind of stopped doing that. But for me now, I'm kind of similar to you. I keep my dad alive through the stories and like embedding him in the here and now and talking about him and not making him an elephant in the room.
Yes.
And actually letting him be part of our lives. And I love it. I love it when other people talk about him as well, because
without the awkwardness as well, though.
Yeah, and without the
so
prompt
freely.
of like having to, exactly, freely bringing him up, because like when you do that, you make the loved one feel like, oh, like they are remembered.
Yeah,
they are thought.
Because that's one of the biggest fears in grief, isn't it? For me, it's just like people will forget him.
Yeah,
people will stop talking about him, and that actually hurts a lot. And I think a lot of people don't want to mention people who have passed away because they're like, it'll hurt your feelings. And it's like,
or bring it all back up again.
Yeah. And it's like, we're thinking about them all the time anyway. But actually, if you speak about them, it just lets us know that we're not alone. We're not grieving alone, because grief is so isolating. It's such a lonely journey. So if we have, a little bit of support, that hand holding, that, what, we get it, we're here for you and we remember your loved one. It is so healing. It is, yeah.
I think one of the things that we don't talk about enough is our feelings. Yeah. Culturally. Yeah. And I think we're getting better at it now, I think, as a whole South Asian community.
Yeah.
Black
slowly.
Canvas.
It's happening.
In ripples. But I think, and I wonder, how much is that steeped in the fear of not letting people know that we are weak or not with it, or in need of help and like
it's
that
so
pride
funny, isn't it?
element.
Because it's not weak at all. I think there's so much strength in talking about your feelings and grief, but people do see it as a weakness.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not weak. I don't feel weak when I speak about Arjun. I feel really strong, actually.
Yeah.
And it gives me strength. But I think it's just hardwired into some people that if you're not moving on from someone who's passed away, you're not moving forward and you're not moving on.
You're stuck in the past.
Yeah, which is it's just not true at all. But there's no convincing, you know, people who are hardwired to think that way. But yeah,
I completely agree. I feel like my loss has actually helped me become more resilient,
Yeah.
be more empathetic, be more confident in using my words as well, which
Yeah.
sounds really strange, but actually I am now able to kind of understand a lot more about myself. And I'm only saying now because it's taken me 20 odd years to
Yeah.
actually understand this is how you're feeling and this is why and these are your triggers. Because it has taken me 20 years to understand that. And
Yeah.
that's also okay. It's not something that, like, grief is unfortunately something that everyone is going to go through in their lifetime. And
absolutely.
ideally there's an order, but as we all know, life happens and there isn't an order and we just don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. Let's be really frank and honest. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I think not putting that expectation on yourself to be like, it's X amount of days or X amount of months or X amount of years, I should be here now. There's no such thing.
No.
And I would just, like, if this episode does anything, I want people to know that it is so okay to feel what you're feeling when you're feeling it, because there is no rule book. There is no said way of approaching things.
No.
And I think it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah. So many people just don't want to talk about grief ever. You didn't have to experience it yourself to be a support. And that's what's really sad, because I don't feel like I've ever had to go through something very specific to empathize with the opposite person. You should be able to sit there and see how they're dealing with life or what's going on with them and just meet them where they are. People's problem is they want to go by their own experience. Well, I went through X, Y, and Z. It'd be nothing to do with grief, but it's like, I was strong. I got through this. And it's like, it's not the same problem though either. It's
And
very
we're not
different.
the same person.
We're not the same person.
And I think it comes from that element of that comparison trap.
Yeah.
100% that comparison trap where people are, and it's like you said, it's really sad that people feel like they have to go through something similar to be able to understand. And I actually think it's like you said, it's having that awareness, but being curious enough to want to understand, seek out, like, ask the question. No one's asking you to be a mind reader. Ask the question,
Yeah.
how can I show up for you?
Exactly.
What do you need from me? How can I help you?
Yeah.
And more often than not, they're going to be like, no, I'm fine. Because I'm guilty of that.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like relying on
You don't want to
anyone.
burden anybody.
Yeah. So I'll be like, no, I'm fine. But even small things like, you know, like obviously when someone passes away, the first month people are bringing food to your house and there's not enough people to eat the amount of food that people bring.
Oh,
Let's
yeah.
be honest. Again.
Definitely.
But like thereafter, it's like, what does that support look like?
After the funeral, that quiet period, it is the worst. And that's when people disappear. And it's like, this is when I need you. It's not the first few weeks or days. It really is afterwards. And that's where a lot of people kind of, I mean, there was a lot of support, but that's where a lot of people failed as well. I mean, you know, there's people who remember the anniversaries every year, but there's people who won't say a word on those anniversaries. And it's so weird to me, because it's like, this is the one day in the year you can tell me you're thinking of them as well, or you remember them on our behalf. I know this person might not have meant as much to you, but you're doing it for us.
Yeah.
And some people just won't. They can't.
Again, that's a bit of a selfish thing as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because they're being more selfish around, it's awkward for me to talk about it, so I'm not going to do it.
So I'm just not going to do it. Exactly.
It's quite sad. It's really sad because, like you said, it's so important for you to feel like he is remembered and he is thought of. And even small things I find within, especially like within our community or like whatever, they're like, oh, but I was thinking about it, I just didn't say it.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Say it to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Use the words. Like, it's so much easier now. You don't call me, just WhatsApp me and say thinking of you. It's so simple.
And it
That's
goes
all it
such
takes.
a long way as well.
That's it. That's all you need to do. Hey, I'm thinking of you today. And I feel like you can communicate that this is what I want at the top of your lungs, but people still won't. They're still awkward. I still have family members who haven't said his name to me. Isn't that insane? It's been 5 years and I am always talking about him. And yet they've never said his name to me. They've never actually acknowledged my loss. They've never said, I'm so sorry this has happened. When I saw them again, they brushed over it and just started talking about life as normal. And it's still really bizarre to me because I don't think, well, it's not normal, is it? Somebody's passed away, someone pretty significant. You should probably say something. But then that time passes and I wonder if they're more awkward now. So they're like, oh, I can't say anything. But then it's like, that's when the anniversary is there. That's when I post his pictures and you can say, sending you love and use an opportunity to mention their name. Because I think we can all get trapped in that awkward state where we're like, oh my God, do we or don't we? But when you're getting a nudge like that, take that hint, take that anniversary and yeah, definitely.
There's when you were saying that, it felt like your feelings were getting invalidated as well.
Yeah.
Because by not speaking about it or going like sugarcoating it or brushing it under the carpet, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
You're not allowing that person to feel, or you're not allowing that person to express what they're feeling, what they're going through.
Yeah.
And by pretending like everything is okay, you're 1,000,000% invalidating that whole person's experience.
You're compounding on their pain. You're making it worse actually, because a lot of my grief got almost it was pushed to the side because my focus now went on, why is this person not speaking to me? So I wasn't even thinking about my actual grief. It was, why are people disappearing? So I had to process that first and then come back to this. And that's not good. Like, don't do that to somebody who's already completely heartbroken. It's not fair,
Just on that, what's your advice to anyone that's in the midst of grief and not really able to even articulate what they need because they don't even know what they need?
Yeah, honestly.
What's your advice to anyone in that kind of state of mind?
Anytime I hear of a kind of a new lost mum, my heart breaks because I don't know what to say to them because I know how it feels and it's awful and nothing anyone can say can ever help. But all I ever say to new lost mums is just hold on, because it's hard. It is so, so hard, but it does come in waves, and that really real pain that you feel in your body and in your chest, it will loosen, it will get easier. You'll find a way to cope. And, there's a big community out there of lost mums who are very, very vocal about their loss and happy to share and support. And yeah, I mean, they definitely saved me. So
that's really nice to hear. And I also know just from speaking to you and your experiences, there wasn't a lot of South Asian lost parents.
None. I was scrolling through Instagram and trying to find South Asian lost mums who were talking about their losses, how they felt, everything that I was experiencing. I wanted to see it, and it took me ages to find it, to be fair, because there wasn't a lot. And then when I found a few, I felt like they were holding back because I guess you have to. I mean, nobody was talking about secondary loss and what happens after. Some people have to quit their jobs. So secondary loss in regards to finances, their jobs, families falling apart, divorces happening because of it. People were keeping all of that really, really quiet. And that's the stuff I needed to hear, because I was having people drop off like anything. I wasn't going back to work and it was about to affect me financially. So why is nobody talking about all this? Like how hard it is going back to work, or, in your case, you would have gone back to school and that would have been absolutely, I mean, I can't even imagine how hard that was, trying to snap back into education. Impossible.
I feel like I probably had split personality in that age, because I remember going to school and being like, hi guys, I'm back, like, and then I'd come home and I really remember vividly like shutting the door, changing my clothes, doing a big sigh to just like release my emotions, and then going back down to be the supportive, you know,
That
eldest
mask,
daughter.
yeah.
Yeah,
You had to put that
masking was
mask back.
100% masking. Probably where I first started masking, but that's for another episode.
It's tough because you're at a very young age. So at that age, people don't know how to support you either. So
And I feel like there's a lot of like invalidation at that age, regardless of grief or
Yes.
not. But like, it's like, even when you go through something or you feel something, I think, especially within a South Asian culture, and I guess the older generation, they're very blasé with your feelings because you're not an adult. You don't know how to feel things.
yeah,
So
oh
it's
my gosh,
invalidated.
that's so true. They do. They really. They're the number one kind of let me fix you and this is how you're meant to do it and let me
Yeah.
give you this instruction manual. You can cry for a week up until the funeral, but don't actually cry at the funeral because you're not meant to. It's bad luck. And then they'll maybe give you a year and then it's like, you need to move on now. That's it. It's done.
You've
It's
had
finished.
your time.
Yeah, that's
What are
it.
you doing?
I don't know how, I mean, that's how they cope with their grief as well. And I'm just like, how are you getting through life that way?
But then that's why they're an emotional wreck, let's be honest.
Absolutely.
Because they're projecting left, right and centre.
They don't believe in therapy. They don't believe in just sharing and just be, I'm so glad things are changing. It needs to.
And I think conversations about genuine experiences and sharing stories, because it is what you're doing, Sita, is so brave. Genuinely, it's so brave. Like, and you are helping spread awareness, but also giving so many people like that consolidation and that comfort that they really need and crave. And I think you are going above and beyond. And honestly, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you and your insights and just your vulnerability as well. Like, your vulnerability really shines through in your healing process and how you're showing up for you, your family, and Arjun as well, and honoring his memory. So like, thank you so much for being really brave and being really raw and sharing your insights and really helping other people understand the layers and the depths of grief, because it's such an important conversation that doesn't happen nearly enough.
No, it doesn't. And which is why I'm so glad that, you know, when you said you wanted to speak about this, I was just like, oh my God, somebody wants to speak about grief. This is incredible, because nobody ever does.
Yeah.
And it's really important, because we do shut this conversation down a lot, and people want to hear it. They do. They don't speak about it, but they you know, I know how much I needed it. And yeah, this is really amazing that we're doing this, because it's so important.
Thank you so much for being part of this conversation.
Thank you so much.
I really hope this episode gave you guys a sense of comfort, but also gave you hope and gave you some tools and some nuggets that you can put into practice with your nearest and dearest. Because at the end of the day, there is no rule book when it comes to grief. And it really is such a taboo topic that no one really feels comfortable talking about, let's be honest. But I think it's about time that we do have that conversation, because there are going to be moments in life where we are going to grieve and we are going to lose loved ones and family members. And it's just an unfortunate event that's just inevitable. So let's arm ourselves with the knowledge and empower ourselves with the confidence to have the conversation and be brave and be there and support our loved ones through arguably the most traumatic moments of their life. So I really hope you enjoy this episode, and I hope there are some key takeaways for you from this. If you haven't already, please do like, follow and subscribe wherever you get this podcast. And until next time, big love.